Chapter 17 of The Shore Road Mystery. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. The Cave. In a moment, the lid of the locker would have been raised. Then came an interruption. "The boss wants us," said one of the men. The man approaching the back of the car halted. "All right," he growled. "We'll leave this." He turned away. The Hardy Boys sighed with relief. "I guess he's waiting for a report," observed a voice as the men began to move off. Their footsteps sounded sharp and clear on the rocks. The sounds died away. Complete silence prevailed. Not even a murmur broke the stillness. The boys remained quiet in the darkness of their hiding place. Finally, Frank stirred. "They've gone," he whispered. "What shall we do now?" asked Joe. "Let's get out of here first. They may come back at any minute." Frank raised the lid cautiously. The blackness without was as utter and complete as the darkness within. He could see nothing. He listened for a moment, thinking possibly some of the gang had remained behind, but he heard nothing. Quickly, he got out of the locker and leaped to the ground. Joe followed. They closed the lid. "Boy, I thought it was all up with us," whispered Joe. "When he came over to open the locker, my heart was thumping so loudly I was sure he could hear it." "Me too. Well, we can thank their boss, whoever he is. I wonder what kind of place we're in, anyway." Frank switched on his flashlight. By its brilliant gleam he saw that they were in a rocky passageway, a large tunnel, evidently in the bluffs along Barmet Bay. It was wide enough to accommodate the roadster, but did not offer a great deal of leeway on either side. It appeared to be a natural tunnel, although there was evidence that human toil had been responsible for widening it and clearing it out. Frank stepped forward and cast the ray of light before him. It revealed a blank wall of rock. Then, as he moved the flashlight to one side, he saw that the tunnel slanted toward the left. "What do we do?" asked Joe. "Follow it up along?" He spoke in a whisper, but the walls magnified his voice, and he awakened uncanny echoes. "Sure, we'll have to be careful, though, or we might meet them on the way back." Frank took the lead. He stepped forward very carefully, making no move that might dislodge a loose fragment of rock and start a tumult of echoes that would bring the gang upon them. Cautiously, they advanced. Joe took his revolver from his pocket and gripped it tightly. They realized that they were dealing with a band of desperate men who would stop at nothing if they were discovered. The Hardy Boys rounded the corner of the passageway, and Frank's flashlight revealed a number of large boxes stacked up against the side of the tunnel. They halted, and Frank scrutinized some lettering on the boxes. "The Eastern Importing Company," he read. "Why, that's the name of the company that lost the truck," Joe exclaimed. "Remember, the two men who were held up and rolled down the bluff." "It's the same name, all right. I'll bet this is some of the truck cargo." The boxes were 7 in number, and on each was inscribed the name of the Eastern Importing Company. There was no doubt in the minds of the Hardy Boys now that they had made a momentous discovery. This was plainly the hiding place of the auto thieves, and although none of the stolen cars were in evidence, the big packing boxes spoke for themselves. "We'll see what's farther on," Frank decided. He went ahead. Joe tiptoed close behind. The flashlight illuminated the rocky floor of the tunnel. It began to widen out. Stacked against the wall, they came upon more packing boxes, some of which had been torn open. "More loot," Joe commented in a whisper. Every few steps, Frank halted and switched out the light. Then they stood in the darkness, listening. They had no desire to stumble on the auto thieves or reveal their own presence. However, the boys heard not a sound. There was not a glimmer of light in the impenetrable gloom that lay before them. A few yards farther, the tunnel widened out into a veritable cave. Here, as Frank turned the flashlight to and fro, and the boys were confronted by a sight that made them gasp for the moment. In the great rocky chamber, they saw 3 large pleasure cars and a small truck parked close by the clammy walls. "The stolen autos," breathed Joe. There stood 4 of the missing cars, undamaged, in this secret cavern in the bluffs. They had been driven in along the tunnel from the beach. It was an ideal hiding place, and as the entrance to the tunnel was doubtless well masked, the cars were as safe from discovery as though they had been driven into the ocean. At least, so the thieves probably thought. "We've found them!" Frank exclaimed. All the missing cars were not hidden here, but the boys judged that the rest were probably stored farther on, for the flashlight revealed a dark opening in the rock at the other end of the cavern, an opening to a tunnel that no doubt led to other caves farther on. The Hardy Boys knew that the shore road bluffs in certain places contained caves and passages, some of which had never been entered, although, like most Bayport boys, they had done a certain amount of exploring along the beach. They had never heard of the existence of this underground labyrinth. It seemed strange to them that so elaborate a series of caves had never been explored, and their existence was comparatively unknown. "Wait until Bayport hears of this," Joe said. "Let's get out of here and hurry back to town." "I suppose we should," Frank admitted. "I'd like to know where those men went. If we go any farther, they may catch us, and then we'd be out of luck. But if we start back to town, we'll have to walk, and they might all clear out in the meantime. It would be a few hours before we could get back here with the police." "We'd have the satisfaction of recovering the cars anyway," Joe pointed out. "I believe in playing safe." "I'd like the satisfaction of rounding up this gang as well." Frank advanced toward the opening at the far side of the cave. "I think I'll just poke along in here a little way and see where it leads," he said. Joe was dubious. He was of a more cautious nature than his brother, and was satisfied to let well enough alone. They had found the missing cars. This alone was sufficient, he reasoned. Having come this far without mishap, he did not like to risk spoiling their success. However, he followed Frank into the tunnel. It was narrower than the one which had led them to the cave, and its sides were rocky and uneven, while the roof was low. It was quite evident that none of the cars could have been driven through this narrow space, and as the boys went on they found that the roof was lower and the walls even closer together. Finally, the flashlight showed them that it was almost impossible to continue, as projecting rocks jutted out and there was just enough space to admit passage of one person. Beyond that, the tunnel seemed to close altogether. "Guess this is a blind alley," said Frank. "We may as well turn back." He handed the flashlight to Joe, who led the way on the return trip through the tunnel. Suddenly there was an uproar immediately ahead, a clamorous, deafening crash. The boys jumped with astonishment. In the darkness of the subterranean cavern, their nerves had been keyed up to a high pitch, and this tremendous clatter was so unexpected in the dead silence that had surrounded them that they were almost paralyzed with momentary fright. There followed a rattling and bumping of rocks, and then silence once more. "What was that?" exclaimed Joe, recovering from his scare. "Sounded to me like a fall of rock." Frank's voice was shaky, for he had a suspicion of what had actually happened. "It seemed mighty close. That's what I'm afraid of. It may have blocked up the tunnel." Hastily the boys went forward. In a few moments the flashlight revealed a sight at which their hearts sank. The passage before them was completely closed up. Great boulders, ledges of rock, and a heavy downpouring of earth formed an apparently impenetrable barrier ahead. A loose stone, no doubt dislodged when they went by a short time before, had given way and had brought down this miniature avalanche from the roof and sides of the tunnel. "We're trapped," Frank exclaimed. End of chapter 17.